Hey guys, this is Brian, and today we're going to talk about how to calculate your charge rate. So what I'm going to do basically is kind of explain to you how I get the whole number myself, and then I'm actually going to dive into the actual metrics on like what are the actual percentages you should be shooting for, and then I'm going to actually walk you through on how to actually calculate and get to your actual number that you should be charging for an estimated amount of gross you're looking for percent-wise. Okay, so let's just dive into it. At first, this is how I do it. So let's just say you have 100 hours for labor that you budget for your job. Okay, the charge rate right here, this is what we're going to use for this example. So like, let's just say you're charging $60 per labor hour. I just wrote there 60 times 100. So like whenever I estimate jobs, I typically have a labor, material, and paint budget. So like for the labor right here, I actually just took this number right here and dropped it right down. Okay, so like the charge rate being 60 an hour, my labor bucket is about $6,000. This is not direct labor, how much it costs to actually pay the guys. This is like including all the gross markup inside. Then for the material, I have 150 marked. So how I get that, I always take the number of hours for the job, so it's 100 in this case, and I just add 50 to it. Okay, so 150 for material, that's like any plastic, tape, etc. And then paint is my last category. So like I just wrote a random number of $800, for example. So for a 100-hour labor hour job that's budgeted, again, there's labor, then there's material costs, and then there's paint cost. So for a 100-hour job, I would sell that for $69.50. Okay, so that's kind of how I do it and what it looks like. But let's dive into the actual, numbers behind it all. So here is where we're going to start. So like up top, you see like we're going to be looking for the actual charge rate. All right. Right here is hours per job. So like with the same example as last time, we're going to keep the $100 or the 100 hours for the job just to keep it uniform. So like right here, these are the metrics that are like standard in our industry for the painting world. So like paint material, people can generally keep it close to 15% or lower. Anything higher means you're probably spending a little bit too much on paint material, or you need to increase your charge rate. Okay, direct labor, I'm going to use 40% for this one. If you're good, some companies can get that closer to 35%, but 40% is pretty safe, especially if you pay your guys a little bit more. This is where mine kind of floats around. And then gross profit, 45% would be the remaining. So like this right here is basically like a healthy gross profit, and this is kind of like a really good target to shoot for on average. So like there's companies that can gross above 45, and some companies grossing a little bit below. But these are the metrics we're going to use for this example right here. So like what I did down here, this is basically the first place you got to start in terms of like what you're looking for. So like you're going to like try to find your blended labor rate. So let's say you have a team of 2 on your team, and you have one guy sitting at $20 an hour and another guy sitting at 25. So you're going to take the average of these two. So you're going to add them together and divide by 2. And that's going to get you 22.5. So like that's your blended labor rate for that team. Okay. So then you're going to want to find your labor rate with burden. So like that's including any tax, workers' compensation, like anything behind the scenes. It kind of gets like factored into the back end of the labor cost. So like, do you want to take this into account? If you don't, you're going to be misreading your numbers down the road. So like you're going to take the blended labor rate. I just multiply by 1.2. There's probably going to be a lot of people kind of giving me like some hard times on like this not being like specifically accurate, but for me it's enough just to like kind of round it up with that. So I just basically multiplied this by 1.2, and then that got me $27 per hour that I should be perceiving every single labor hour costing me. Okay, so the labor rate with burden is 27 an hour. Okay, if you bring that down here, next thing you're going to want to do is take your labor rate with burden, which is 27, multiply that by 100 labor hours. So like we got that from up top here. And that's going to get you $2,700 for your direct labor. Okay, and whenever I say direct labor, I basically mean that that's just how much your actual employees are costing you. So like that's not factoring any of your personal wages or anything like that. That's just like straight out what the cost of the labor is right there. So $2,700 for the labor. Okay. Let me write that down here for you. So I wrote $2,700 for labor, which is 40%. Okay. So like next thing, you can take this number, bring it down here. Since up here it says direct labor is 40%. You know, if you're shooting for 45% gross, what you can do here is divide this direct labor cost of $2,700 by 0.4, and that's going to get you this number right here of $6,750. Okay, so like what this number means for a 100 labor hour job, if you want to gross 45% and you have a blended labor rate with burden of 27 an hour, the job needs to cost $6,750 in order for that to happen. Assume that you're producing it on time and profitably. So once you have this number right here, bring it down here. You're going to have the total job cost here. And what I typically do is just subtract out the paint material. So like how I got this number, the 1,012, I basically just took this total job cost number and multiplied it by 0.15. And that's 15%. Okay, so like whenever I say 15%, that's pretty generous. Like all of my job sites, I'm typically floating around 12 to 13% on average. Sometimes I do 10%, sometimes closer to 15. But if you're good, that should be lower than 15. Assuming that you're not like reinvesting a lot of capital back into the business. Okay, so $1,012, $2,700 right here. That's going to make your gross profit, just to toss a number at you. That's the 3,038. Okay, but that still doesn't answer the question. So like what charge rate would you need to charge for 100 labor hours to make this much profit? So what I did down here, so I basically took the total cost of the job, subtracted out the cost of the paint to get this number, and then I just divided this number by 100 labor hours. Okay, the reason that that works is because up here, the direct labor and the gross profit, that number combined is the total labor cost that I basically did the math for in the previous example. If you recall, like the 100 labor hours times 60 an hour, for example, comes to $6,000. So that $6,000 number, if you can recall, that's this number plus this number. Okay, it doesn't match up here because it's a different example, but that kind of like explains that if you just subtract out the paint, this is the labor and the gross profit. So like how I calculate it, it works out if I just divide that by 100, and that gets 57.38 per hour that you should be charging to gross 45%, assuming that your team is at 20 an hour and 25 an hour, and their blended labor rate with burden is 27 an hour. Okay, so what I would do here, I would just round that up to 58 per hour. So I'll always round up whenever you're talking about the charge rates. So I'm just going to write up here. And there you got it. So again, 100 labor hours. If you wanted to gross 45%, if your team's making 20 to 25 an hour, you're going to have to charge at least $58 per labor hour and add in your material and add in your paint costs on top of that. Okay. I hope that kind of makes sense and helps you out. To give you like a little reference point on my end, most of my jobs, I typically charge $66 an hour just for labor, and then I add in paint and then I add in material. But that's just because like we add a lot of other stuff in our company that needs to be accounted for in terms of cost, whether that's like benefits or like legal packages, reimbursement options. There's just a lot of things that we do in terms of structuring our company to offer a lot more to the actual painters and laborers on the team. So again, if you have any questions in terms of how to actually calculate that, if what I said didn't really kind of click, just click the link below. There should be like a link just to like me in terms of like reaching out to me via email or text. send me a question, whatever you got to do. I'm just here to help to make sure you're actually budgeting these jobs and making sure they're profitable for you. But thanks, appreciate the time. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.